And today, the focus shifts to climate change at the United Nations General Assembly. Yesterday, President Biden and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made passionate pleas for unity against Russia. Jared Hill has the latest.
World leaders at the United Nations General Assembly will hold a climate action summit today, just weeks after the UN declared this summer the hottest on record.
We need to continue tackling the challenges that most affect people's lives, from conflict to climate change to corruption and beyond.
President Biden spoke at a leaders' gathering at the Metropolitan Museum of Art last night, hours after taking center stage at the UN to push for continued support of Ukraine against Russia's invasion.
We have to stand up to this naked aggression today and deter other would-be aggressors tomorrow.
Ukraine's president doubled down on that message.
While Russia is pushing the world to the final war, Ukraine is doing everything to ensure that after Russian aggression, no one in the world will dare to attack any nation.
Already, Ukraine has received hundreds of billions of dollars in international aid. Now, House Republican leaders are questioning President Biden's request for another $24 billion package.
Where's the accountability on the money we already spent? What is the plan for victory? I think that's what the American public wants to know.
Yesterday, President Biden also said he's committed to making sure Iran never gets its hands on a nuclear weapon, as 5 Americans who spent years wrongfully detained by Tehran finally arrived home on U.S. soil. Jared Hill, CBS News, New York.
Here now to talk a little bit more about the UN General Assembly and Sweden's path to NATO is Swedish Minister for Foreign Affairs Tobias Billström. Thank you so much for taking time out to join us this morning. First, I want to get your reaction to the speeches that both President Biden and President Zelensky made yesterday.
Well, I think it was very clear when we listened to everything that was being said that President Biden made this very passionate speech about the need to support Ukraine. And President Zelensky, well, we all know what he was talking about and what the case that he made for this. And for Sweden, this is, of course, in a way, existential. The war in Ukraine shows what happens if you allow a big state to encroach upon a smaller state's territory and say that might is right, which is exactly what Russia's aggression on Ukraine is all about.
Let's talk about Sweden and Finland, but Sweden, because you're here, is path to NATO membership. One of the things that I think sort of defines Sweden around the world is neutrality. And I think it's a little bit also a part of Swedish ideology, Swedish culture. Do you lose anything in your pursuit towards NATO membership and perhaps moving away from that neutrality that we all know?
No, not at all. On the contrary, I would say that albeit that we have a very long history, we have been a non-military aligned nation for almost, for 200 years.
Yeah.
So that's a long, long story. But on the other hand, though, when you see what's happening in Ukraine and you see Russia's ambitions, and we know that Russia, prior to the war in Ukraine, in December 2021, sent a letter to the world saying that Sweden and Finland should never be allowed to join NATO. We know what this was all about. And for our security and the safety of our nation, we need to join NATO. And no, we do not believe that we give something up. We will gain something from this. And we have a very strong support. 77% of the Swedish population are in favor of NATO membership.
Right. Are you convinced that both Turkey and Hungary will let your membership go through without resistance?
Well, there was a handshake at the NATO summit in Vilnius in July this year between the Turkish President Erdogan, the Swedish Prime Minister Kristersson, and the Secretary of NATO Jens Stoltenberg. And that confirmed a statement where Turkey said that, they are going to ratify. As for Hungary, well, they allowed us to get the status as invitee already in the summit in Madrid last year without any preconditions. So when there is a clear green light coming out from Ankara, I'm sure that Prime Minister Viktor Orbán will stick to his word that we won't be the last, as he has said.
And if Sweden becomes a member of NATO, should you support Ukraine if it also continues to ask to be a member as well?
Well, from our point of view, the open door policy is what brought Sweden onto the threshold of NATO. So, of course, we're in favor of that. But it wouldn't do for me, representing a nation which hasn't yet become a member of NATO, to speak overly much about the conditions. Of course, we are also in favor of Ukraine joining the EU. And there is now clear statements coming out from the Commission that they set Ukraine on a path, and we are in favor of the reforms that Ukraine has to undergo in order to become a member of the EU. But I think that's also very important, close also to the question of NATO membership.
Yeah. It's an interesting time in the world. I suppose it always is, especially for you. There's been a lot of focus on Ukraine and Russia, but you know there are tensions all over the globe. There are issues in Africa, a number of coups, of course, tensions when it comes to China. When it comes to the UN, there have been a number of leaders who are not going to be here this time around. Xi Jinping's not here. Vladimir Putin is not here. Rishi Sunak of the UK is also not here. At the same time, we're watching some other organizations like NATO expand, but not just NATO. NATO, perhaps the BRICS organization, perhaps G20 entertaining maybe the African Union becoming a member. My question to you is about the importance of NATO, of the UN, and whether or not it is still the influential organization that it once was, whether or not it can be a game changer.
Well, you spoke previously about the statements yesterday, and another statement was given also by the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who clearly talked about multilateralism and the need to understand that there has to be reforms within the UN. And Sweden is supportive of reforms to make the UN stronger and more vital. However, we shouldn't underestimate the fact that the UN Charter is also very closely connected to Ukraine. And the fact that if we allow Russia's aggression in Ukraine to come through, well, the UN Charter will be gone. And that was something which we learned after the Second World War was vital to see to it that aggression between states are now considered a criminal act. So reforms of the UN, yes, and the UN certainly being, as we view it, a vital instrument for world politics. But we have to be critical friends of the UN. And I think that's also a message which Sweden is sending here with our presence at this General Assembly.
Minister Billström, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.